Hey everyone, I want to first thank you for joining me this evening and taking the time out of your day to get educated. This will be part two of a three-part series on wholesaling real estate. We're going to walk you through each executable step so you know what to do, when to do it, along with using our awesome REI Pro software. Now, if you missed part one, don't worry. You can watch this training by either going to your education center in REI Pro, or you can go to my YouTube channel. We're going to get started here in about 20 seconds. So if you want to grab a pen, paper, do that right now. All right. Now, well, before we get started, we have had a lot of people ask us about our live event schedule and how they can come see us live. So I'm just going to let everybody know now. Uh, well, we're currently sold out. So we really don't have any room. And when we go sold out, we don't allow anybody else in the room. But we are planning on adding another stop, which will probably be in Houston, Texas. We're going to put it kind of right in the middle of the country. We do have a lot of people that travel from all over, so definitely take advantage of that. We will keep everybody informed as soon as we get that scheduled. My name is Chris Goff. I'm the founder of REI and Me. It's Real Estate Investing Marketing Entrepreneurs and co-founder of the REI Pro Investor Software, which many of you already know. We do have a local investment company. It's called Group 360 right here in Peachtree City, Georgia. What a beautiful place if you've never been there. My husband, father of three, actually grew up in Northern Virginia, and that's where I started real estate investing. I wasn't there very long until I decided to quit my job when I was a kid. My dream job was to work on airplanes, and I went to school, got a degree, got my license, landed my great job at United Airlines. And after about a year, I realized, although that was my dream job as a kid, that was not my dream salary as an adult. And I'm like, what is this real estate investing? And I had bought the Carlton Sheets program. I went through it and I was totally confused. I had no idea where to go, what to do, how to do it, when to do it. But I believed in it. You know, I think for a lot of people, it starts with a passion. You have to have this in your heart, and that's when you're going to do well at it. You see a lot of people that try to attempt real estate investing. Most people will fail at it because they don't understand the executable steps. It's kind of the unique thing that we do, and especially in this three-part training and pretty much every training we do, it's all about these executable steps. We're going to be walking you through there. And then I eventually quit my job and said, I'm going to do this full time, and moved to a small town in Texas where I did 46 deals my first year. And I was in the wrong neighborhoods. I was filling out contracts wrong. I didn't even know how to evaluate a property, but I was doing it. And I was just shocked that I was actually making money from it, and started to think, I don't even know if this is legal, you know? So been very successful since 1999. And needless to say, there's been roadblocks. There's been a lot of ups and downs in the business. And one thing that I really have learned is just don't learn one strategy. You know, one strategy is going to pay your bills, but you should make it a goal to learn multiple strategies. You need to be able to walk into a seller's house. A seller tells you their situation, and you're going to have a solution for that, which would be a strategy. So this part, we're going to be talking about wholesaling. I know a lot of people generally start here. It's where I made my first check, was a wholesale deal. So I'm really excited about the strategy. I love the strategy. And we're going to get into extreme depth, especially in this part too. So creative real estate, really specialize in that. Two-time best-selling author, national real estate marketing expert. I was on the Brian Tracy TV show, which aired on ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox across the country. There's the book that we did, a book collaboration, was actually nominated as one of the top 30 entrepreneurs invited to do this book. you can go to reiandme.com right now and you can actually download the digital version. Of course, it is on Amazon as well. There's a picture of me on the red carpet in Hollywood after I received the award. That's Miss Oregon interviewing me. And then you'll see my lovely wife, myself, and a very famous author. A lot of you are probably very familiar with. His name is Jack Canfield, wrote the Chicken Soup for the Soul series. But my highlight, and what's something that was very blessed to have the opportunity to meet Brian Tracy and then be interviewed by Brian Tracy, was pretty awesome. What a great guy he is. I couldn't speak highly enough about this guy. He's just brilliant. Again, there you go. There's the book you can download. And then more recently, actually wrote a book with Brian called Uncommon, where I actually wrote a piece in there about lease options. Being in real estate being common, but maybe an uncommon strategy for people to do. You can purchase the book. It's on Amazon.com. Great news is all the proceeds we donate to a charity. We receive no money whatsoever for the book, but it's a great cause. You're going to learn a lot and learn from other people as well. Just recently, we had a 4-time Emmy Award-winning director just came in and filmed a documentary. It should be releasing sometime in the end of June is what I hear. We'll let you guys know and share with you the full release of that documentary when we do get it released. Where they filmed me and Bo being a programmer, marketing, online guy, me being the real estate guy, and how we came together and developed REI Pro, our investor software, which is pretty awesome to actually have done. Just a great experience. So we'll keep you guys posted on that. That would be really cool to actually see that. Now, part 3 is going to be tomorrow night. So we're going to wrap up and conclude our wholesaling training tomorrow night. Those of you that are on REI Pro, which most of you are, go ahead on your dashboard. You'll see at the bottom where you can register for part 3. Those of you that are not in REI Pro, we will be sending some emails tomorrow. I hate sending too many emails and then some people get too many, double the email. Somebody's got a free book or someone's in the software. So we apologize ahead of time for that. We will make those corrections as we move along, but get registered for part 3 because this is where we're going to conclude and finalize steps 7 through 10 on how we get buyers, how we do contracts with buyers, how do you do a double close, how do you do an assignment, all of these good things, how to get the title company to do the deal. For some people in some areas might not be so common. So that's going to be extremely important. So be sure to get registered. We're going to do that at 8 p.m. That again is going to be Eastern time. I always liked what Donald used to say. There are 3 groups of people. People will make things happen. People will wait for something to happen. And people will say, what happened? Right? So you got to find, where are you? What group are you in? All right, just to kind of recap real quick, part 1 where we talked about these are the executable steps. And if you're just joining us, maybe this is the first time you've ever been on one of our training sessions, lower your guard down. We don't promote or sell anything right here. We are giving you 100% education. It all comes down to these 10 executable steps. We talked about step 1 being lead generation. And, how do you find these hidden opportunities, either by driving around or even pulling the lead straight from REI Pro? And in step 2, we talked about contacting the owner. We can either use REI Pro's unparalleled phone number search, where we have the free and paid version following those phone scripts in step 2, or send direct mail. So building out your campaign and then using REI Pro's professional postcards, or you can print a vacant letter and mail it yourselves. I always say to my students, if you have a high volume, just send the postcards, a lot cheaper. If you have a low volume, then send the letter, maybe make it a little bit more personal. That's kind of just a general rule that I like to tell all my students. And then we ended on conducting a property inspection. So tonight, we're going to be covering steps 4 through 6, which are by far the most important steps, because I couldn't tell you how many people say they're in real estate. And then I ask, well, how many offers have you made? Well, I haven't made any. So how do you do deals if you can't make offers, right? So tonight's going to be really valuable to you. We're also going to be talking about how to fill out an actual contract with the seller and sharing with you all the things that need to go inside of the contract. Now, just real quick, last week, I was in Colorado working with one of my students, and within a matter of just a few days, we found over 30 properties. We made 2 offers, and we put a pre-foreclosure under contract. So not too bad. And we all did this just using the methods that I'm teaching you, and of course using REI Pro. So let's get going. All right, so step 4 is kind of the moment of truth step right here. And I see so many people, please do not overanalyze this particular step. And I see so many people that do. I'm going to explain to you how to get the right numbers, as far as what is the property value. So obviously, we need to determine that before we make the offer is what would this property be worth in tip-top shape? And that's what we call the after repaired value. So always assume that I'm going to put this property in tip-top shape. Now, understanding the fact that you're going to be wholesaling it to a retailer or someone that's going to buy it low, fix it up, and resell it. The point is when you do the inspection, you need to assume that you're putting it in tip-top shape. So we need to understand what could it sell for if it were in tip-top shape. And the old saying goes, you make your money when you buy, you realize your profit when you sell. All right, so this after repaired values, where do we get that number? Where does it come from? How does it work? We like to use the abbreviation ARV, just so when I say ARV, you know what I'm talking about. But really, this is the most important number because we're going to back out every other number in the formula from this one number. Now, the best way to do it is having an appraisal done. Now, the problem with that is you're not going to have an appraisal done before you've even made an offer. You don't even know if the seller is going to accept the offer, so that would get quite pricey. The next best way is what we say comparable or comps. You will find this very common as far as like MLS comps. Current listings, not very good, but sometimes, you have this property maybe in a rural area where there really aren't any comps. So you have to find something, maybe even current for sale by owners. Again, and if it hasn't sold, it's not really a true comp. Sellers you could ask $1 million for the house, but it may not sell for till, maybe 500 grand. And then of course there's internet sites out there, as you guys know. I think of the most common one that people go to would be Zillow and finding an estimated value. Now there are 12 states, just so you know, that it is against the law to publish sold data. So you may be in one of those states, such as Texas being one of those states where you just can't, Zillow can't put sold data that is strictly protected by the MLS. So I'm going to share with you, how do you find those numbers? Where do we actually get these numbers and put them all together so we can find the perfect ARV? We move into structure and offer. So we call it all cash offer. So it's not necessarily you're paying dollar bills for it. We're just saying that you're going to pay the seller one lump sum. And it took us like 7 to 8 years to figure out this formula, which we're going to get into in your software in step 4, which it's going to calculate for you. I'm going to show you how to do all that. But basically, it's going to encompass, here's what it's potentially worth, and then all the expenses and profits associated with buying and selling the property. This is going to calculate exactly what you should offer for the home. So we kind of break this down. There are several components. If you ever forget any of this, obviously you can rewatch the video, but we do have instructions inside of REI Pro, which I'll share with you. So the very first number is we need to find the ARV. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to pull comparable sales inside of REI Pro in order to determine what would the best ARV be for this property. And again, this is the most important number. We move to, there's a repair expense. So obviously in step 3, we walk through the property. We went through, made a list of repairs. We'll total that up into step 3 in REI Pro. That number will actually carry over into step 4. So you don't have to go back and retype this information out. Acquisition cost is going to be the next thing. And these are going to be things like title exam, that basically the closing cost for buying the property. You're going to have these expenses, and it's going to be a little bit different no matter where you're at. I know we closed on a property, and it was about a $150,000 property. And if I closed on that same property in California, it'd be this price. If I closed on it in Texas, it'd be this price. I closed on it in Georgia, and it was $700, and we paid all of the closing costs as far as acquiring it. So it's going to be a little bit different. You need to find out what these costs are in your local area, and then you'll be able to plug it in and move a lot faster. The next part of the formula is what we called holding expense. And basically, these are expenses associated with, the utilities, taxes, insurance while you're fixing up the property. Now, remember, you're wholesaling it, so you're wholesaling it to someone else, but you need to account for the costs that they're going to have. Otherwise, you're going to pay too much for the property. The investor's never going to buy it. You're going to have to walk away. So we have to include all of the potential expenses that the retailer is going to have, and holding expenses is going to be one of those. Next is closing costs. Now, like I said before, there are closing costs, what we call acquisition costs. These closing costs are after the retailer has bought it. They may turn around and fix it up and resell it. They're going to have closing costs. So it's really the cost of selling versus acquiring. And a lot of investors forget to add this in. And it's funny, they go through this property, they rehab it, and they're like, man, I didn't make as much money as I thought. What happened? And a lot of times they're not including the cost of actually selling the property. We want to do that up front before we even make an offer. The next one is what we call a hedge expense, and this is more or less a buffer in case your inspection analysis was a little bit wrong, or maybe there was a leaky water pipe that you couldn't see, you didn't make a note of that. We want to kind of add in a little bit of buffer here, which is going to be about 10% we throw in on your repair expense. So if your inspection costs come out to $10,000, your hedge expense at 10% would be $1,000. That'll leave us some extra room. And the good news is if you don't use that hedge expense, that's going to carry more into someone's profit. So, and again, we want to have it there for any kind of mistakes. It's just that extra money there. Next is advertising expense, and this is really after you've already bought it. So a lot of the rehabs that we personally do, we don't use a realtor to sell it. We're really good at marketing, and we generally sell the property within a few days anyway. So we're going to have some advertising expenses. Now, if you wholesale properties to maybe an investor that uses realtors, then again, the very next line would be the agent commission. Now, keep in mind, sellers pay the commissions, not buyers. So after I wholesale this property to a retailer, they fix it up and they're going to use an agent. We're actually calculating the cost for the realtor before we actually make the offer to the seller. So we're taking all the expenses associated with buying and selling the property. And then we get down to our profit center. So the first profit center is the wholesaler assignment fee, and this is where you come into play. So we're talking about wholesaling. Now, this is going to vary a little bit, so you're going to have to play with these numbers. I've literally have seen properties and worked properties that I know I could pay X dollar amount, but the seller came back and said they would actually take less before I even made the offer. I've also found deals where I've had to go back and adjust my wholesaler fee just to get the deal. So this number is not going to be set in stone. You're just going to have to play. It's a matter of setting a percentage and then making the offer and then knowing that you have room for negotiation. You might have to come down a little bit. The second part of this is what we call the retailer's profit. And this is the person you're actually wholesaling the property to. So if they're not going to make money, they're obviously not going to buy the property from you. I like to throw in there probably at least 15%. I know some investors, they buy for long-term appreciation. I know some investors that want to get in as cheap as possible, fix it up as fast as possible, and sell for as much as possible. So I think as you're working the business and you start building your investor list, which we're going to talk about in part 3 tomorrow night, you're going to get a good understanding who you're selling properties to and understand kind of the profit margins that they're expecting, so you can make sure that you're making the right offer so we can put it under contract in order to sell it to them. Once we calculate all of the expenses, all of our profits, then we're going to come up with what we call our all-cash offer. And this is going to be automated for you in REI Pro. We do have a manual worksheet that we do as well for those of you that may be out on the road and you just want to calculate something real quick, or you don't get Wi-Fi, something like that. I'm going to show you how to get the ARVs in REI Pro. How do you get the comps? Which comps should you select? And so forth. I'm actually going to use a real property that we're working to show you which ones and how to look at the comps. Where do you start? Do you look at sales price, the bedrooms, baths, and so forth? Then we move into step 5. So here we've presented our offer. And again, I like to present the offer preferably in person if you can. A lot of times you can't. Maybe the seller lives out of state or something. I want to do it over the phone, then follow it up with an email. I hate just shooting an email and thinking, it's too easy to say no. It's too easy for the seller not to ask questions. They may not understand. And I think a lot of people think that you're lowballing. It is not really lowballing a seller. If I take what it's worth, I take the expenses, and of course there's got to be some profits, or who would buy the house? That's what our offer is. So it doesn't have to come across as that you're lowballing. And then we move into contracts, and just kind of a disclosure here. Always have an attorney review your contracts. We don't currently provide contracts in REI Pro for a lot of reasons. And if anybody has a contract through another software, you need to get it reviewed by an attorney. Number one, we do 5 different strategies, and one of those strategies, seller financing, there's 30 ways to do it. It would be impossible to upload that many contracts throughout. Are there places online that you can go to? Sure. Could you go down to your attorney? Sure. One of the places that you could go to is rocketlawyer.com. That's a place where they do have state-specific contracts. Again, I would still have somebody local review them. So once your offer is accepted, we need to put under contract. When do you put it under contract? ASAP, right? Before they take another offer. So simply signing the contract gives you what we call equitable interest in the property. This allows you to assign or sell, advertise the property. And keep in mind, when you're wholesaling, you're not selling the house. The house has nothing to do with it. You're selling the contract for a fee. Okay, and we're going to talk more about that as we get into the closing side of this and how many ways can we close and how does it all work. We're going to talk more about that. But every real estate contract in the world is called an option contract. And what that means is the seller has to sell, but the buyer doesn't have to buy. Now, could the buyer lose potential earnest money? Yes. And this is a lot of times, especially you're probably familiar with a realtor contract where there's an inspection contingency. You have X amount of days to inspect the property. If you don't like it, you can back out of the deal, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I'm going to break the contract down for you guys and show you exactly what are the basic requirements that need to go in a contract. Again, I'm not going to be talking about state-specific contracts here. I know that this particular one-page contract that I'm going to share with you, I've used time and time again. I've used it in numerous states, and I've used it in the last 2 deals that we've just closed. All right, so when putting properties under contract, one key part is what we call a contingency clause. Some people call it an out clause. Some people call it an exit clause. We want to have certain things in here. Example, Chris Coffey and/or signs. Now, technically, you don't have to put that in there because every contract is assignable unless it says you can't. So like a realtor contract's not going to allow you to assign it. We would need to change that. Again, that's why we don't use realtor contracts. We use our own contracts to do this. The other contingency clause that we use every single time is subject to my financial partner's approval. And what that means is if I can't find a buyer within X amount of time, I can legally back out of the deal, no harm, no foul. Okay, so having this subject to my financial partner's approval, you don't even have to disclose who your financial partner is. It could be your dog. It doesn't matter. And we talked about in part one, a seller coming and saying, well, what does this mean and how to answer that particular question. But honestly, guys, they rarely ask this question. It's not something very common because keep in mind, we are working with motivated sellers. This is somebody that has a property. It's a distressed property usually. We have it at a good price. They can't afford to fix it. It's been sitting vacant. Somebody could vandalize. This is a lot of stress on the seller. They're just happy someone's actually interested in the property. So some of the basic legal requirements, number one, having an agreement that you mutually agree upon. Have it in writing. No, it doesn't have to be on an 8.5 by 11. But normally that's perception-wise, that's what you need to do. And again, you know, how many pages makes it legal? And I'm going to prove to you tonight, you really only need one page. Now, again, we can add to this. We can take a few things away, but at the end of the day, I want to tell you exactly what are the basic legal requirements in every contract. Again, signing it there. Seller and buyer must state all parties involved. You would state your company name. So now, does it have to be in your company name? Let's say that you're just getting started. You've never done a deal. Does it have to go in your company name? Now, most people would probably say yes, and I would say why? And rarely does anyone ever know why. And that's one thing that I do a lot is tell you why. You don't have to have it in your name if you're just getting started. Number one, you're not ever going to own the property. The IRS says you could do up to 15 per year before they call you a dealer, which they're going to tax you more. So do you have to? No. I know some people, Chris, I can't even afford to set up an LLC until I do my first deal, and that's totally fine. Just don't get in a habit. Now, obviously, putting in your company name, the main advantage in wholesaling is for the tax benefits. That's it, okay? But most of you are probably going to use an LLC, which is a pass-through company anyways. So the tax benefits are really not the liability issues. If you never own the house, you're really not liable for it. So we get into seller financing where we're going to get the deed or we're buying property. It is a little bit different. We have to identify the property. Obviously, we have the property description, 123 Happy Street. But more importantly, we need to get what's called the legal description. It's also property identification. It's called differently depending on your tax assessor. We can get all of that information right inside REI Pro. Contingencies, like I shared with you, these are clauses that are put in a contract that must be satisfied for the deal to go through. If not, then it becomes null and void. So purchase property, be sure to have some contingencies. Here's a couple again. It's very important. I use this in every single contract, not just for wholesaling, every single contract. This one I use every single time. Subject to my financial partner. You can put and/or assigns, but like I said, every contract is assignable unless it says it's not. And then obviously some common one here, subject to inspection. We would give X amount of days on to inspect it and so forth. Another one obviously would be subject to financing. But again, if we're making an all cash offer, we kind of want to present it that way to the seller. Identify a purchase price. We need to have initials. I always like to just initial the bottom of each page. I think it's a great habit to get into in case there's any kind of changes, or if you email the document, somebody makes a change over here and you didn't realize they made the change. Like to initial everything. Consideration. So there must be some type of consideration. Usually it's money, and by definition, it does not have to be money. Most people put what's called earnest money down. Your job as a wholesaler is to put as least amount as possible. I could just tell you I've never put more than $500 down on a wholesale deal. That's just, I would like to go as low as possible just to make it enforceable. Most states there's a minimum. A lot of states are at least $10. Again, and one thing with earnest money is, do you ever give it to the seller? Absolutely not. You'd never give the money to the seller. You don't even know if they truly own the property at this point. It always goes to that third party who's ever going to close the deal, either be a title company or be a real estate attorney. And I'll tell you what they did in Houston years ago. These guys would find vacant properties, they'd kick in the door, change the locks, put a for sale by owner in the front yard, and then put a small ad in the paper. Investors would show up and they'd be like, well, I just lost my wife. We really need to get rid of this property. I'm going to let it go for this price. Now, if you can put down a $2,500 earnest money check right now, I'll let it go for that price. And guess what people did? They started writing out these checks. They take that check and run on and do it again to someone else. So never, ever give the earnest money to the seller. Need to identify a closing date. I like to give myself 60 to 90 days to close. Now, again, you could say, well, if the seller asks, why do you need that much time? A lot of times, if you're building your buyers list up front, you don't need 60 or 90 days, but I'm really kind of gearing this to people maybe just getting started. They don't know any buyers yet. Give yourself 60 to 90 days. Here's your answer is, hey, we're going to close this property as soon as possible. We just want to allow ourselves this time in case there's any hiccups with the title and so forth. And just keep it real simple. So basically, here is the entire contract, which you probably won't believe. We've been using this contract for years. Again, always have an attorney review all of your contracts. This is kind of the bare basic contract that you could possibly use. And I'm going to break this particular contract down so you know exactly how to fill it out. And actually, one thing that we'll do, because you guys are so awesome for being here, and we really do appreciate all the compliments that you guys send in. How about we do this? If you're a current REI Pro subscriber, I will send you this contract. If you're not an REI Pro subscriber, get registered for your 30-day free trial tonight, which I'll show you how to do. And if you're in the trial, I'll send it to you as well. And that way you'll have a hardcore copy of this. I'll send it in a Word doc so you can actually edit it yourself, put it on your computer, you're going to have it. So let's break this down. So the very first part, you're going to identify who the seller is, and keep in mind, you might need that husband and wife to both have both of their names in here. Don't think that you're just selling it to one person. Agrees to sell and convey to you, which would be the buyer, even though you're not buying it, you're wholesaling it, but you are the buyer. Again, you would want to put your company name down and say ABC LLC. And buyer agrees to buy from seller the following described real estate together, all improvements there, all permanent rights located at. Again, you'd want to put the address here and then put in the legal description there. It's like lot 1 of block 2 of this subdivision. Sometimes it's long, sometimes it's crazy, sometimes it's short. Whatever it says from the tax assessor, which you can pull up in REI Pro, just copy and paste it right there. That is the most accurate identifier for that particular property, because you could have 1, 2, 3 Happy Circle, Happy Drive, Happy Street, Happy Road. When you put the legal description in, it's that piece of land on the planet. So it's a very specific identifier for that particular property. We'll then put in the purchase price. That was our offer or any kind of negotiations. Whatever number you finalize, that's where it's going to go. All right, so this part is very important. Okay, so conditions of purchase are as follows. Buyer will deposit blank dollar with blank title company, or it could be a real estate attorney. Again, you want to put down the least amount. Now, sellers want the most and you want the least, right? So as least as possible. So we have a contingency clause here, subject to review, inspection, written approval of my financial partner. So if for some reason you can't find a buyer, you can legally back out of the deal. Buyer may place appropriate sign on the property prior to closing for prospective tenants, contractors, and or signs. Again, this gives us the right to show the property. The seller agrees to allow buyer to show property to prospective partners, contractors, and or inspectors prior to closing. Again, you're going to need to show the property to other investors that are going to come through. A lot of times, keep in mind, it's a distressed situation. This isn't you selling your own house at a discount. This is typically a distressed situation. This is generally not a problem. Now, if it's a vacant property, what happens if the seller is out of state? So how do you get in? One of the things I would like to do is maybe try to get a key. And if they say, well, I don't really know you, I don't want a key. So what I'll do is I'll call and say, hey, need to, get in the property. We need a blah, blah, blah. Can I get the key? I'm going to call again. Can I get the key? Can I get the key? And finally, the seller, here, take the key. All right. So we want to have easy access to the property. Now, if it's not vacant, we're going to have to coordinate and schedule that through the owner. Okay. So keep that in mind. Number 4, is there an addendum to the contract? You would circle yes or no. Basically, an addendum is anything that you want to add to the contract that's not in the original agreement. We would add that into an addendum. 9 times out of 10, you would circle no here. Is this transaction cash or terms? Again, it's going to be cash, meaning that they're going to be paid in one lump sum. Possession is to be given on or before the date of closing. That's standard. Seller agrees to pay all taxes and assessments up to and including the date of title transfer. Now, that could be negotiable, but 9 times out of 10, it's going to read that way. Closing costs shall be paid by who? Is the seller going to pay closing costs? Are they going to pay their portion of closing costs? Or do you come in and say, hey, here's my offer. I'll pay for all of the closing costs. Again, that would be a negotiable. Closing date shall be on or before. Now, what date do we want to put in here? This is where you want to give yourself time, 60 to 90 days from now. You want to put that date there. Number 10, this offer, when accepted, compromised the entire agreement. Purchaser and sellers agreed that no other representations or agreements have been made, just some legal stuff. And then what I like to add in here is the offers remain open for acceptance until when? I want to know if I have a deal or not. So I usually give them a day, or I'll sign it right now. If they've already accepted the offer, I'm going to put today's date when I'm signing it. If maybe the seller says, could I have my attorney review it? Okay, I'll give you till X day in order to do that. Then you're going to date, seller's going to sign, you will sign. Now, if you do have a company, you're going to sign as whatever position you hold. Chris Goff, manager of ABC LLC. So make sure that you sign it properly. If it isn't an LLC, you're probably going to have to supply documentation of the LLC to wherever you're closing it. So keep that in mind. If you don't have a company set up, you would just sign your name. That's it for that. Okay, so again, we want to sign this as soon as possible. Always make 2 copies, one for the seller, one for yourself. Be sure to have this contingency clause in your contract. And again, always consult with an attorney. We're going to move to step 6, and then I'm going to get back into REI Pro and walk you through all of this. So this is kind of a neat tool, and it's one of those tools that you learn from because it happened to you. So how do you think I know how to do this? So basically what it is it's a piece of paper. And anytime that you sign a contract with the owner, could the owner go around your back and sell it for more to someone else? Could that happen? It could happen. Now, that would be breach of contract. You could sue the seller, but are you actually going to do that? Are you going to put a $2,500 retainer fee and give it to an attorney and say, see what happens? You probably won't. So to protect yourself is what we call the affidavit of memorandum. This is going to be step 6 in the software. I'll show you how to print this off. It's very, very simple. You don't even need the seller to sign it, which is pretty awesome. It's just you are swearing to the world that I have this house under contract. We're then going to file this down at the local courthouse or recorder's office. It needs to be notarized. And the prices vary from anywhere from $20 probably to $60. So I'm going to file this. It's going to get recorded in your county. And we do this because if the seller signed a contract with somebody else, they go to closing, they're going to have what's called a title search. When that title search happens, guess what pops up? Your affidavit. The title company will then stop the closing and say, we already have a contract already on this property. Now, how do you think I know all this? Because it actually happened. So this is a good security blanket. Not people even know. I even had realtors say this is a great way from another realtor to actually take the listing. So it's a great tool for you. Get in the habit of doing it. You know, it's when you don't do it is when something happens, right? That's usually when it does happen. All right, so I'm going to get into REI Pro. I know most of you guys are already in REI Pro, but if you have no idea what I'm talking about, REI Pro is really that complete investor tool from a CRM, lead generation, direct mail. Most importantly, we're going to walk you through these executable steps, and that's what you're going to see here in just a second. So you can sign up at myreipro.com. We give a 30-day free trial. No harm, no foul. If you, for some reason, it's not for you, if you just go to your account settings, there's a close link. You can just close the account and be done and move on. To me, I don't even know how people do real estate now without it. Now, when I got started, I wish I had something like this. I didn't even know what I was doing, just guessing. And now that we have access to the information, really information is the key. So if you're not a registered user, go check it out. It's going to be the complete package for you. We've got tons of new updates and features coming out this year. We're actually adding a new lead generation source here very soon. We're restructuring our whole lead generation piece to it. So look for that in the near future. Let me get over to REI Pro 1 second here. All right. So now that we're in REI Pro, this is the dashboard. Obviously, you guys know this. I'm going to actually pull up a property that we're working here. And you can always, I don't know if a lot of people know this, you can actually go ahead and filter the types of leads right here. And what kind of lead types, you can just filter those down. As you start entering in a lot of properties here, be sure to give it a status, give it a property type or lead type so you can stay organized. Otherwise, it's going to get confusing. You're not going to remember where in the world it is. But if you ever forget, you can always search right here a particular property address. You can also, if you hit this little drop down, which is kind of cool, a lot of you may not know that, you can actually search for somebody's name as well. So anyways, let's get into this particular property. We're going to go here. Now, we went through step 1, 2, and 3, but one thing I want to show you in step 1 is the actual legal description, which is over here to the right. I'm highlighting it for you. That is where you would put that information in the contract. So that's where you're going to get the legal description. Again, you could get to comparable sales from here in step 1, as well as, let's go to step 4. We're going to go to comparable sales. And this is going to, let me kind of tell you where this comes from, because a lot of people ask that. This particular, where we get this information, is straight from the recorder's office in every county. Now, although we don't have every single county in the US, I think we have 135 million properties out of the 140 million that there are. I'm being told that we're going to have access to even a few more counties. And again, this is probably going to be in the more rural areas or a county that just isn't up to snuff, I guess you would say. So we have this property here, and number one, we have an REI Pro value. I want to kind of identify this particular REI Pro value. This REI Pro value, what we do is we take a 30-day window, and we update this every 30 days, and it kind of takes in what's going around this particular property. But I want to, you know, subdivisions change, and you can have a subdivision that's different just a street over. So you definitely want to make sure that we're looking at the right information. So we take kind of an overview. It gives you a quick analysis of the property. And then as you scroll down, we're going to start to see properties that have sold. Again, you can see the sold dates, the price, the bedrooms, baths. Now, if we don't record the baths, it's because your tax assessor doesn't actually display it. So some states, I think there's a couple where you may not see any bedrooms or baths. Here, you're just going to have to know what those are. Again, you could Google these particular properties and find that information. So as we look down, the very first thing that I want to look at, and the way we have this categorized is A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and basically you could zoom into this map, and it's going to be the closest property. Okay, so this is the closest to our subject property. The very first thing that I like to look at is the size per square foot. Okay, so I can see up here that our property is 1,231 square feet. I like to find properties first that are close in size. Again, matching bedrooms, particular bedrooms for sure. So I can see this one's 1,128, the next one's 1,001, then we start to drop down. You see the year built, it's all roughly going to be the same in this particular subdivision. Look at the price per square foot, and this is the price per square foot sold. Okay, and you'll notice that a larger home, the cost per square foot is actually going to go down. This is why you say, you know, you never buy the largest house on the street, because the large house is bringing up the value of the small house, and the small house is bringing down the value of the large house. Us as investors, we're trying to find that happy middle. Okay, so we're going to try to find that happy middle. So here we have a comp that's 1,128, 3-bedroom. Our property is a 3-bedroom, and it's in the same court. So that's a really good comp. You just want to check these comps. Those of you that may be in a state where you don't see the price here and you see a little lookup, just click that lookup. Like I said, some states it's against the law to actually publish the sold information. But if you click on that lookup, we have this little guy in REI Pro. He runs down to the recorder's office and he brings the information right back to you pretty quickly. So if we can gather that information, you got to click that lookup button. For those of you that have it displayed, you have nothing to worry about. You won't have to click on anything else. So I'm going to move to the next property. Again, it's a little bit smaller. It's 1,001 square feet, but it's still 3-bedroom. It was sold this year. And I'm just kind of going through just square footage at this point. Scroll down, the next one's 988, so we're getting a little bit smaller than I'd like. 991, again, smaller than I like, and I see this one down here, 1231, and then another one down here at 1231, and then we get down to 1579. There's a lookup right here. So now the problem with the first comp that I see, now that I've gone through some of the square footage, is the date. So this is almost a year old. So a lot of times we may not want to use something that's sold too far in it, you know, behind us. Obviously we want to find the most recent comps, but guess what? Sometimes there aren't. So keep that in mind. This property here did sell this year, but again, it's a smaller square foot house. It is going to affect the ARV, but again, we're going to take some averages. So although this house sold last year, I really like to select this comp because again, we're going to average all this stuff out anyways. This particular comp, again, last year, still too small. We scroll down. This one would be actually a good comp. And again, I want to make sure that I'm still in the same subdivision. As long as I'm still in the same subdivision, it's okay to go a little bit further out. Now, once I've selected, I always say try to at least select 4 properties. Sometimes you can't just because there really isn't anything comparable. But I'd like to do at least 4. Once you select your comps, I'm going to go ahead and this calculate after repaired is going to give us an ARV, which is going to pop up to the top right here. Again, you can print this comparable report out. Now, once we fill out these comps and hit that number, as we move into the cash offer, it's automatically going to get that number plugged in for you right here in the after repaired value. Okay, so as we're going through, and again, you're probably wondering where that repair expense, if I go back to step 3 real quick, I need to update that total here. And you can always go in no matter what. So this number is going to carry over the repair expense from step 3. Again, you can always adjust any one of these numbers just by clicking in here. We talked about acquisition costs. Now, again, this is going to be generally speaking, this is kind of a national average. It may be less, it could be more, it could be right on target depending on where you are. What I would recommend is call your title company or attorney's office and find out what typical closing costs are going to be. So if I know in this particular area, it's going to run about 1.5%. Okay, we give you a general rule of thumb, and those general rules are going to be across the board, just so you know. But I know this area because I was there and I understand it. So holding expense, I'm going to move that up to 2%. That's going to be pretty good. And then closing costs, instead of 3% or 2%, I'm actually going to do 1% because I am familiar with the cost in this particular area. Now, the hedge expense is that buffer expense we talked about, which is buffering that repair expense. So anything that comes up, you need that extra money, that's where this is going to happen. I like to use just 10%, which would be the $3,000. Now, if you're going to advertise it where you know your investor doesn't use a realtor, this would be good to plug in maybe $500. Now, if you're not sure what your retailer is going to do, just plug in some money. Next will be a realtor commission. Again, depending on what state you're in, will affect this particular cost. We're going to go to 6% in this example. Now we get down to our profit center. So this is kind of important part. This is where you're going to make your money. And this is where I said it could change. So as I slide this slider bar, I'm really, we recommend 5 to 20%, but sometimes I really can't hit that number. I'm going to go 3% in this particular example, just because I'm familiar with the property and I know the inspection costs. I know how where we need to have this. And then retailer's profit, I want to jack that up to at least 15%. Now you may work with some investors that don't mind 10%, or maybe you work with some that really need a higher rate of return. Again, that would be 30,000, which would be pretty good. So what we're doing is really calculating our offer from the acquiring side. Okay, don't worry, we already know how we're getting rid of it. We're wholesaling the property. I'll go in and I'll hit calculate offer. It's going to come out to $111,000. Now, that's what we call our maximum. So if we took the ARV, what it would sell for if we fixed it up, minus the repairs, minus these expenses, minus our profit centers, we're going to come up with a max offer of 111. Now, do you want to start your offer there? Because if you start there, you have no room for negotiation. That's where you want to start your offer. And maybe let's say that we started at $109,000 as an example. Okay. Now, I always like to put the percentage of the after repaired. We're basically taking this number divided by the after repaired gives us a percentage. I just have a general rule. I'd like to, any distressed property that we pay cash for, again, buying it at a discount. And number 2, I'd like to keep under 65%. Now, you can't just go to the property and say it's 65%, because if this property needed more or less repairs, it's going to really affect that percentage. You have to fill out every single thing here in order to get the right offer. Now, what we're going to do is simply hit print offer. Now, this box is going to pop up. You have a couple of options here. Again, we're going to print out the all cash offer. This is what we're going to present to the seller. If you like our verbiage, the way that we write our particular offer letter, you could just print that up in a PDF. If maybe you like a lot of it, but you maybe want to change a couple things for this, maybe it's a specific situation, you definitely want to address something, then you can print it up in a Word document. You also have the capability of uploading your own custom offer letters. So in this case, I'm just going to pull up a PDF just to keep it simple. So once I do that, it's going to download. I'm going to pull this up, and you can have your logo on there or not. It's going to say, dear so-and-so. If I actually put in the homeowner's name it would actually show up there. Let me show you where to do all that. So I'm going to close this out. When you go up to fill in the contact information, you would then put their names here, contact, and so forth. Once you do that, it's then going to carry over into this particular document. So, dear Jerry, thank you for showing me the property located at this address. I'm very interested in your property. Would like to submit an offer for your consideration. Sales price of $109. Again, thank you for your consideration. I look forward to hearing from you. And then go ahead and personally sign it. Now, I would like to email this, but before I email this offer, I want to call them and make it verbally over the phone. Best case scenario is to meet them at the property if you can. That way, if they have some questions, you know, you kind of look at it and say, hey, well, if the house is worth $200,000, why in the world would they ever take $109? Well, here's the thing. Guess what? It needs a lot of work. It takes time. You have holding expenses. You're not going to buy unless there's a profit. So that's where, you know, don't think for a second that, oh, because it's worth this much, you're not going to be able to get this offer. You have to follow the system, plug the numbers in, and this is what it is. I don't care what the seller wants. I care what I can actually offer. If you start getting in a habit where you're paying too much, you're not going to be able to sell it. Okay. Now, the next steps, I'm going to show you how to, and this is going to be in part 3 tomorrow. Now, what do we do? What do we do? We just put this house under contract. How do we find a buyer? What kind of ads do we use to find buyers? What do we ask them? What questions do we ask? Now, some people, and you see the logo here, some people don't want the logo on there. Now, when it's wholesaling, I really would like not to put a logo on there. And here's why. I kind of want it plain Jane. If you start putting a fancy dancy logo on here, then the owner's going to think you have a lot more money. So the perception is that you have more money. Okay, and you have this nice professional logo. Oh my gosh, maybe they're offering me too low. I like to come across dead broke when I do this. Okay, now if it's more of a lease option offer or something like that, that's where I would use my logo. But in wholesaling, I want to keep it so plain. I want to look dead broke when I talk to these owners and how I present information. You know, don't necessarily get too fancy with this. With the other strategies, yes, I want to look professional. I want to come across professional. I want to do all those right things. But in this particular business, just stay away. Now, once we get this house under contract, which I showed you how to do that contract, we don't currently provide the contracts. But what we do right now is give you the opportunity to upload this contract. So once you get it signed, upload it into REI Pro, it's going to stay attached here. And you can always use it, go back for a reference versus maybe putting it in a file cabinet or a folder or something like that. Then we move to step 6. So now we have the house under contract. The next step is filing the affidavit. So what we're going to do here, and keep in mind, like I said, there's instructions on every step here. You just hit that little instructions. It'll drop down. You can close it. We're going to go ahead and download this affidavit, and it looks like this. Okay, now you do want to print this out blank because keep in mind you have to get it notarized. Okay, so print out a blank copy. Before me, the undersigned authority, this day personally appeared, that would be you, who's being first duly sworn, deposed, and says that in agreement for purchase, sale of real property described in the attached Exhibit A, you again bring a copy of the contract, was entered into in between the affiliate as buyer and blank as seller. All you have to do is write the seller's name here in front of the notary on what day. What day did you sign that agreement? The closing of the purchase sale of said property per terms of the agreement is to take place on or about, again, this is going to be the closing date that's on the contract, which remember we talked about giving yourself 60 or 90 days. Copy of the agreement for purchase sale of real property may be obtained by contacting Chris Goff, whose mailing address is blank, whose phone number is blank. You would need to fill that out. You would then date and sign, and then the notary is going to fill out the rest, put the stamp of approval, and then pay a filing fee. Now, once that's filed, you can forget about it. Now we could go and advertise for this buyer. which is going to move us into step 7 over here, which we're going to talk about tomorrow night. I tell you, that was dead on, about an hour. So I really hope that was some really good information. And again, keep this simple. I see so many people overcomplicating these steps, overcomplicating every little thing and overanalyzing stuff. You don't have to do that. Really keep it simple. The exact same way that I'm telling you is the exact same way I've been doing it for years. It works every single time, but you have to follow the system. Follow the cash offer formula. Follow the comparable sales. Do your research, do your due diligence, but don't overanalyze a lot of these numbers. If I'm 1,000 or 2,000 off, it's not going to make that big of a deal. Okay, because again, I've added some buffers in here already. Okay, and I'm starting my price a little bit lower anyways. So we're creating some buffer for you because I understand that some people are probably going to make a mistake somewhere, and we don't want to lose the deal. We want to get the deal. We want to put it under contract. Once we get under contract, we're going to file the affidavit. Once we file the affidavit, we're going to market that particular property. Now, do you have to wait to find your buyer before you get a house? No, you could start finding your buyers right now. The fastest way to do that, there's 2 ways. And again, we're going to go into more detail on this, but you could go right into Lead Pro here and pull up cash buyers and landlords and send them some direct mail. Start building a relationship with these people out there. And next thing you know, you're not going to have, you're going to have numerous investors that you call on. So basically it will happen like this. I'll put the house under contract. I'll call my investors or I'll shoot them an email. Hi, Steve. Hey, I've got this property on 123 Happy Street. Why don't you drive by, take a look, see if you're interested. Hi, Mike. I've got this property at 123 Happy Street. Drive by, take a look, see if you're interested. I'm going to just let my investors know that I've got this property. Okay, then I'm going to show you how to start closing the property tomorrow night because there's a couple of different ways. And I know a lot of people get really confused. They hear about this double closing, how it works. Well, my title company says that I can't do a double close, so I've got to go through all those ins and out pieces. But at the same time, it's not difficult. And the thing with real estate, I think we make it difficult and we overanalyze. And I think this is why a lot of people probably not do well at it because they're not following what I call these executable steps. They're all over the place. And if you just follow this, it can be simple. It doesn't have to be complicated. Okay. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to take any questions. We will, if you have a dire need question, just email us at contactus@myreipro.com. Shoot us the questions. We'll be happy to answer your questions. And be sure to get registered for tomorrow's training. This is going to conclude everything for you as far as wholesaling. Next week, we will start to put in the recordings for step 2 or part 2 and part 3. If you're not in REI Pro, go sign up. It's 30-day free trial. You have nothing to use. I won't even teach people without it. That's how valuable, of course, we're the creators of it. But there's one thing that I always hated about software is that every software, they give you the information and then they don't tell you what to do with it. Our whole software is founded on the executable steps and then with all the other fancy dancy stuff in there. It's pretty awesome. So go check it out. Definitely appreciate you guys. It's like a big family for us. Nobody's a number here. I will also be sending an email just as a reminder for tomorrow evening's training. So we're going to conclude part 3 of wholesaling, which has been pretty awesome. So anyways, appreciate you guys. We'll talk to you tomorrow night. So get registered and we'll see you then. Bye.